Hi! It's been a while since I posted on here, 8 months exactly, mostly because I haven't really been motivated to make a lot of Star Kid content, and also I've just been on TikTok a lot more, making a lot of Haikyuu related content, and I finally wanted to do something Haikyuu related on here. Please excuse the lawnmowers in the background, it's very annoying, they came out right when I started filming. But yeah, today I specifically wanted to talk about queer coding in Haikyuu. Before we get into specifically queer coding in Haikyuu, I want to talk about queer coding first. Now, queer coding is often compared to queer baiting, and some people find these terms hard to define because they're not really like official terms, and there's also like not very, like, it's hard to draw the line between queer baiting and queer coding. In my opinion, I think one of the main differences between queer coding and queer baiting is that queer baiting is usually intentional, whereas queer coding isn't always intentional. It can be intentional, but not all the time. A very good example of unintentional queer coding is in the Harry Potter books. Harry Potter specifically. Since Harry Potter is told from a third-person limited perspective, it's told from Harry's perspective. Whenever J.K. Rowling uses her imagery and her words to describe boys and how handsome they are, it unknowingly gives Harry very strong bi vibes. So yeah, that is an example of unintentional queer coding. A very good example of queer baiting is the infamous Keith and Lance from Voltron. I never watched Voltron, I dodged a bullet there, but I've heard from many sources that it is a very good example of queer baiting because the creators are aware, but then it just fell completely flat. Other examples include BBC's Sherlock and also Supernatural. Technically, kinda, I mean, Distiel's kind of canon, but like it was still a little baity. I would define Haikyuu as having queer-coded characters, not queer-baited characters. Now let's talk about Haikyuu. What is Haikyuu? If you're coming from my TikTok page, you probably already know what that is, but if you're one of my followers that followed me for Star Kid stuff and is watching this video like, Hannah, what the hell is a Haikyuu? Well, I'll explain it. Haikyuu is a volleyball shonen anime. I believe it originally aired in 2013. I could be wrong. Editor's note. But the show originally started as a manga series created by Furudate, and it's very good. That's pretty much all I'm gonna say about it. Even if sports aren't your thing, like me, I wasn't expecting you to like this anime as much as I do because I'm not a very big sports person, let alone do I know anything about volleyball. But the characters are just written exceptionally well, and the character relationships are great. And this show isn't going to be necessarily about ships. Obviously I am going to be talking about shipping in this because it is about queer coding, but you don't have to ship in Haikyuu, and that is like totally okay. That's totally fine. It's not a romance anime. Some people don't ship in this show, mostly because they like that it focuses more on friendship and strong bonds, which I totally understand. And if you agree like that, this may not be the video for you, but we're gonna get into it anyway. Let's start off with part 1. First up, we're gonna talk about Kagehina. Kagehina is the pair name, or like the ship name, of the two main characters of Haikyuu, Hinata Shoyo and Kageyama Tobio. They have an extremely interesting and well-developed dynamic, and a lot of people think that Haikyuu is just about winning, when it's not. It's actually about Kagehina's promise. It's about their relationship together. They have a very interesting dynamic because when we first meet Kageyama in the first episode, the way he's characterized, his teammates not liking him being angry and aggressive and kind of selfish, he's framed as if he's going to end up being a major threat in the show, like he's going to be an antagonist, like Oikawa ends up being, who we'll get to, don't worry, we'll get to Toru. But Kageyama, the big twist of the first episode is that Hinata and Kageyama end up going to the same high school. So instead of Kageyama being an antagonist, he's going to actually have to work with the protagonist. So that is a really interesting dynamic straight off the bat. Just overall, their relationship is just very entertaining and interesting. Not only are they very like funny, like they have very like comedic moments with each other, they also have some really harsh moments. Notably, in the season 2 training camp arc, they get into a pretty physical fight in front of poor, sweet Yachi, who we'll also get to. Their fight is, I see a lot of people use this fight as an excuse to say that their relationship is toxic, but boys tend to have physical fights all the time, and not just boys, but in this show, since it's majority male characters, I'm just gonna say boys, they tend to have a lot of really physical fights that don't mean as much. Obviously, if it was a boy and a girl, it would probably be considered a completely different situation, but they're both very rowdy, and they both kind of instigated it. Kageyama was very angry, Hinata was being stupid and annoying him, and things just escalated. That was kind of a breaking point for them, because throughout all of season 1, they were starting to really get along with each other with their quick attack. But then the training camp arc, after they lose to Seijo at the beginning of season 1, during the training camp arc, they were trying to better their quick attack because they realized that people were starting to catch on to them. And they both do so much for themselves as the story progresses, and their relationship is extremely important. In season 3, their relationship isn't like super developed because season 3 mostly focuses on other characters, namely Sukiyama, who we'll get to. Season 4 is also very important. The ball boy arc, which is the first part of season 4, is an arc that a lot of people have a lot of disdain for. I've seen a lot of people say that it gave them secondhand embarrassment, it was hard for them to sit through, blah blah blah. I've heard it so many times that at this point, I'm kind of tired. Like, do you want a prize for getting through the arc? Do you want an award? Oh my god, you watched an anime. Like, shut up, it's kind of annoying. Anyway, basically in this arc, Kageyama gets invited to go to a training camp, and so does Sukiyama, but Hinata's like, why don't I get to go? So, Hinata sneaks in to the training camp that Sukiyama attends, the youth camp, and he gets reprimanded, obviously, but he's allowed to stay, and he is a ball boy, and even though I was a little embarrassed for Hinata, I watched the arc. Like, who didn't? Like, it's a very important arc, and one of the main things that Hinata grapples with in the show is that people often tell him that he's nothing without Kageyama, and that he's only good at spiking because Kageyama's sets are so good. But in this little, like, arc, we get to see him receive, we get to see him be more independent, he's even spurred on by Suga. So yeah, the ball boy arc is extremely important, and then for the rest of season 4, we really don't get much of their dynamic. Like, it's mostly introducing us to the new team that they're playing. We get some really good Nekama episodes, who we'll get to. Now this next part is going to have some manga spoilers, just a warning, so if you don't want any spoilers, please go to this timestamp. So in the manga, there's a specific panel where as they're graduating, they kind of say goodbye to each other, but it's not a goodbye, it's a see you later. Kageyama goes off to play for Sweden, Hinata stays and he plays for the Japan national team, and they actually get to play against each other like they always wanted to from the beginning, and their story is beautiful. And now let's get to the gay aspect of this all. Can their relationship be read as queer? 100%. It's very clear that Kageyama and Hinata love each other, that they appreciate each other's company, that their friendship, their relationship is extremely important to them, and it can be 100% read as a queer relationship. However, is everyone going to read it that way? No. And honestly, I think that's okay. Obviously, it is a little annoying when people attack others for shipping it. If you attack young people for shipping Kagehina and say it ruins Haikyuu, please get a life. Oh my god, I'm just gonna assume you're homophobic or something if you hate a gay ship that much. Like, Haikyuu is literally about them. Oh my god. But Kagehina is a ship that makes total sense, and if I'm being completely honest, it's not my favorite ship. I think it's an extremely important dynamic, and I love their relationship, but is it my favorite ship in a romantic sense in Haikyuu? No, it isn't. But obviously I get why it is people's favorite, and Kagehina is a very good example of queer coding because it's not intentional for their relationship to be read as queer, but it's also not baity either. Like, they don't make it seem like something's gonna happen and then it just doesn't. So yeah, Kagehina is a perfect example of a queer-coded, strong relationship in anime. Now on to part 2. Now we're going to talk about Boku Waka, which is the ship between Katoru and Takashi Keiji. They're not they're side characters. They don't get nearly as much screen time in the anime. So I'm going to be talking a lot about the manga in this section. So you might want to just skip over this if you haven't read the manga, but it's not going to be too spoilery in terms of like plot points, but it is going to spoil like what they do in the time skip. So Bokuto and Akashi, like I said before, are side characters, so they don't get nearly as much screen time as Hinata and Kageyama do, because they're the main two characters. We are first introduced to Bokuto in the training camp arc, and he is a lot like Hinata. He is very loud, he's obnoxious, in a sense, he's an extrovert. He's very kind, he's funny, he has mood swings, you know, he's a very talented volleyball player. He's the captain, he's a third year, he's the ace of the Kurodani. I believe he's the fourth best in Japan during that scene. Akashi, I'm pretty sure, like, makes a joke about it. But he's a very talented player, even albeit a bit of a dumbass. And Akashi is kind of the complete opposite of Bokuto. Even though it's only his second year, he's the setter, he's the official setter, and he's co-captain, which just proves how talented he is and how much Bokuto admires him. He's quiet, he's anxious, he's intelligent, he thinks before he speaks, and when he doesn't speak very often, and when he does, it's usually something very blunt or very, like, intelligent. Akashi is an amazing setter and an amazing character in person, and even one of the main reasons he ended up going to Fukurodani was because of Bokuto, and because they are so opposite of each other, that's how their dynamic works really well. One of my favorite creators on TikTok, I'll show you one of their videos, does color theory and explains relationships with color-coded characters. They did an amazing video on Bokuto and Akashi, so I'll either leave that link below or I'll show it in the video, depending on what editing me decides to do.
My printer is broken, but that will not stop us. We're going to talk about Bokuto and Akashi. Akashi is a purple-coded character and Bokuto is a yellow-coded character. And in order to understand this complementary relationship, we need to look at their actual personalities. Akashi is a very grounded character. He's very intentional and he's very introverted and very stuck in his thoughts. And that's what makes him successful, because he's well thought out in his actions. Bokuto is a yellow-coded character, and that means he's very extroverted, he's very quick to act, and he's very prone to please people, and he's very affected when people aren't pleased by him. And so Bokuto and Akashi can work together to create this situation where Bokuto can lend Akashi some of that ambition and get Akashi past his barrier so that he can get what's inside of him out, because he's a very successful character. And Akashi can lend Bokuto some of his apprehension, because Akashi can teach Bokuto that it won't be the worst thing in the world to think twice before you act.
But their relationship gets developed a lot more in the manga, considering they're really only a little bit in season 2. There's some OVAs where they play, and then they have some scenes in season 4 where they like banter and they talk while watching the Karasuno game. But in the manga, Bokuto goes off to be a professional volleyball player, and Akashi is a manga artist.
He's actually an editor. He's not an artist. Sorry about that.
And they canonically call each other like the protagonists of this world. Bokuto calls Akashi his world. They have all these moments that are just, for lack of a better word, they're very gay. They have a lot of very gay moments. Their relationship is just so unbelievably queer-coded. And I meant to mention this in my Kagehina segment. Soulmates. This word gets thrown around a lot, and there's a lot of different definitions of what exactly a soulmate is. I've always interpreted soulmate as two people who are destined to meet each other, that are perfect for each other. So think people like Ash and Aishi from Banana Fish, Killua and Go from Hunter x Hunter, Hinata and Kageyama. So Boku Waka could definitely be interpreted as soulmates, and contrary to popular belief, a lot of people think that it's like Bokuto who loves Akashi more, but honestly, in my eyes, it's Akashi who took a liking to Bokuto first. Like, he sees him and he's like, he calls Bokuto a star. Again, something that is just so straight. No, but Boku Waka is probably the ship that I've consumed the most content of in terms of like fan fiction. I have read so much Boku Waka fan fiction. One of my favorite authors on AO3, Death Bell, writes really good fan fiction, and it's mostly from Akashi's perspective, and their writing is gorgeous, so I'll leave some links to their stuff down below because they are very good. Yeah, but Boku Waka is another extremely queer-coded relationship. Again, I don't think it's baity in a sense. I think that like it's totally fine to read their dynamic as Bokuto being a very trustworthy person who just really loves and appreciates Akashi. I've also seen a lot of neurodivergent people headcanon them as Bokuto having ADHD and Akashi having OCD. I'm not going to go too far into this because I am neurotypical, so I don't really have a whole lot of knowledge on the subject and I don't really feel comfortable talking about it, but I have seen a lot of people say that like Bokuto is very like neurodivergent coded, which I think makes total sense with the way that he acts. Same with Kageyama. I've seen a lot of people say that Kageyama is autistic coded and his special interest is volleyball, which I think is very interesting. So Boku Waka and Kagehina, both soulmates, both important. Who's next on our list? Well. Kuroken. Oh Lord, Kuroken. This is a dynamic, a ship that kind of got ruined for me, mostly because the fan base just mischaracterizes Kuro and Kenma to the point where it's hard for me to enjoy it, but we're gonna talk about it anyway. So Kuroken is a ship between Kuro Tetsuru and Kenma Kozume. I don't know if I pronounced their last names right, or are they their first names? Names in Japan still confuse me. Anyway, they're childhood friends, and they have a great dynamic. There were these two amazing episodes in season 4 that are probably some of my favorite episodes in all of Haikyuu now, where we just learn more about Kenma. Kenma is an extremely interesting character because he's introverted and he's quiet and he's calculating and he's intelligent, but he can also be like really, for lack of a better word, feral sometimes. Like he can get angry when he wants to, especially at Lev. Kenma doesn't like Lev very much. Well, I'm sure he likes him, but you know what? No. It's canon that he dyed his hair because he didn't want people to notice him, but clearly that backfired. And his roots are a little messed up. One of the main reasons he gets into volleyball is because Kuro wanted him to, not because Kenma doesn't even really consider himself to be an athlete. He doesn't even really consider himself to be that athletic. And he loves volleyball, but it's not like his main motivation. Kenma contrasts a lot to Yamamoto, who is another character who is in the same year as him at Nekoma. He is quite the opposite of Kenma. He pushes himself too hard. He considers himself to be an athlete, and he is a go-getter, a bit of a show-off, an overachiever. And Kenma and Yamamoto actually get into a fight. And it's great. And at the end of it, Fuku, I can't say any of their names. Oh my god. He throws water on them, and it's very funny. But Kenma is a character that is just really hard for me to describe. As you can tell, I'm like my gears, they're turning. But he is very apprehensive, and he doesn't open up to people very well. Kuro, on the other hand, is extroverted, and even though he's just as intelligent and hardworking as Kenma is, he clearly cares a lot more about volleyball than Kenma does. He's significantly taller than Kenma, and before he met Kenma, he was actually quite shy, and Kenma actually helped him be a bit more open. Kuro is genuinely one of my favorite characters in Haikyuu. I simp for him, I ken him, I love him, he's my life. But his relationship with Kenma is very interesting because obviously there's a reason Kuroken is such a popular ship. I personally don't really like it that much. Oops. But I do think that their relationship can be read as being queer-coded. I don't think it's as nearly queer-coded as Boku Waka is. Boku Waka has a lot more moments that can be read more as romantic, whereas Kuroken, they have sweet moments, but Kenma just is a character that is very hard to read him because there's always so much going on in his mind, but his face is always just like similar to Akashi and Sukiyama, who we'll get to. But Kenma is the type of character that just wants to be left alone to his own devices and doesn't realize that the help of other people is beneficial to him. And that's one of the main things that he goes through, is being able to actually trust and work with his team, and he doesn't really like being the center of attention, which is ironic considering he is at the center of volleyball. He's the setter. He's literally like the control tower. And their relationship is it's also just cute. Like, they have a lot of really cute moments. Like, I'm less looking at analysis here and mostly just like, oh, it's so cute that Kuro has to take away Kenma's games so that Kenma will eat. Or like Kenma sometimes forgets that Kuro graduated when they walk to school. Like cute little things like that. So even though it's not my favorite ship, they do have a very queer-coded relationship. However, I think it's probably like the least gay on this list. Now we're on to part 4. So now we're going to be getting into possibly my favorite relationship, friendship, romantic ship in Haikyuu, which is Sukiyama, which is the ship between Tsukishima Kei and Yamaguchi Tadashi. This ship just have so many thoughts about them. So Tsukishima and Yamaguchi are another set of childhood friends, just like Kuroken. Clearly I have a bias towards them. So my favorite episode of Haikyuu is season 2, episode 8, which is the episode where we learn about Tsukishima and Yamaguchi's friendship and what happened. It's a kind of a Tsukishima-centric backstory. Like, we get more of it from Suki's point of view because we learn about what happened with his older brother and how Akatsuru lied to him, blah 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 blah. I don't want to get too into that because I don't want this video to be too long. Suki is a very interesting character. Suki is a character that gets made fun of a lot in the Haikyuu fandom. There's even like an account on TikTok called like Tsukishima Slander Club or something like that. And you know, a lot of the jokes are kind of funny, but I hate it when people make fun of his backstory, and I also really hate it when people say things like Yamaguchi deserves better than Tsukishima, and like Tsukishima doesn't like deserve Yamaguchi. I've heard these said in like a joking sense, but sometimes I'm worried people are being serious because they 100% deserve each other, and if they didn't have each other, their arcs would be very, very different. If Tsukishima went through all that shit with Akateru by himself and had never had Yamaguchi to like yell in his face and tell him to like suck it up, he never would have gone to the 3rd gem to like, you know, have his whole big thing with Akashi and Kuro and Bokuto, where Bokuto was like, this is when you realize you'll love volleyball. Like, if him and Yamaguchi didn't have each other, Tsukishima would have never blocked Ushijima. And now let's talk about that fight. That fight is like, it came out of nowhere. I remember when I first watched that scene, I was like, holy shit. I still didn't really like Suki watching that episode because when I was first watching Haikyuu, like, I didn't really have the best impression of him. I just thought he was like a snarky asshole, and I didn't really know much about Yamaguchi Tadashi because he barely had any lines in the first season besides just yelling Suki's name. But this fight was very important because it showed that Yamaguchi finally realized that he doesn't have to look up to Suki. He doesn't have to think that he's cool all the time. And he literally, one of the lines in his fight that he says, like, you've been acting really lame lately. Because Tsukishima had been acting lame. Suki is aware of how talented and how much potential he has, but he doesn't do anything about it. He's the tallest person on the team, and he's one of the, you know, just, he's mediocre. And so Yamaguchi grabbed him and yelled at him, what more do you need than pride? And Suki is thinking to himself, like, what's the point of being good at volleyball if you can never win, if it's never good? And that point, you would think that after Yamaguchi grabbed him and yelled in his face and reprimanded him, you think Suki would be angry. Like, if any other character yelled in his face like that, he'd probably be pretty mad, pretty upset, especially if it was like Kageyama or Hinata, because Suki clearly gets annoyed by them. But no. In fact, he reacts in the complete opposite. He tells Yamaguchi, when did you get so cool? He is proud of Yamaguchi for standing up for himself because Suki is aware of how much of an asshole he can be. He's aware, but he doesn't really do anything about it until he's called out for it by none other than his best friend. This is extremely important, and it leads to Yamaguchi being more independent and more confident, and it leads to Tsukishima being more motivated. Their relationship, I believe, is probably the most queer-coded. Like, they literally act like boyfriends. It's so funny. And it's also canon in the manga that they literally they have like little museum dinners together. like weekly little museum dinner. I tried so hard to find the picture of the manga, but it's hard to find because I don't think it's been translated to English yet or like officially released. So it was hard for me to find the picture, but they do go on dates. You can hold me to it. I have some great Sukiyama fics that I'll leave linked. Dean Pendragon on AO3 really comes through with the Tsukishima pining. And that's another thing, is I see a lot of people often say that Yamaguchi is the one that simps for Tsukishima. Like, Yamaguchi is the one that shows more outward. Like, Yamaguchi clearly shows more outward affection towards Tsukishima, but I personally feel like Tsukishima, his love for Yamaguchi is more important because Tsukishima's never really had anyone else that was able to like tolerate him. During the flashbacks when Yamaguchi first sees Tsukishima, Suki is tall, he is intimidating, and he scares off the bullies, but he doesn't scare off Yamaguchi because Yamaguchi is like, you stood up for me. So Tsukishima being around someone who's able to tolerate him and not be intimidated by him was very important, and he clearly needed that friendship. And in, not to mention in most of the official art, like fondly looking at Yamaguchi, just bros being bros. And whenever like Tsukishima sees Yamaguchi do his pinch serve, he's clearly very proud of him. I think that really shows how Tsukishima reacts to things. He's a very calculated person. He's very analytical, and because of this, he has a hard time expressing his emotions. He's not, like I said earlier, he's not as outwardly affectionate as Yamaguchi, and they are each other's opposites. I've seen some people say that Yamaguchi is a lot like Tsukishima, but I disagree. I think that they are foils of each other and that they play off each other extremely well, and I think that their relationship is one of the most important aspects of Haikyuu. Now, I'm gonna be doing this next part in a slightly different format because it's not gonna be about a specific ship, it's just going to be about Yachi Hitoka, who is like arguably the most gay-coded character in the show. She shows a lot of like canon affection and attraction towards women in the show. I've always had canon her as bisexual, however some people say that she's just straight up a lesbian. That's totally fine too. Her sexuality is not canon, so I think it's up for interpretation. One of the most notable things is that one of the main reasons she becomes the manager for the Karasuno volleyball team is because of Kyoko. There's a scene, it's done very well in the dub. I actually really like Yachi's dub voice.
That beauty mark near her lip makes her look so mature. Oh wow, and her hair is so smooth and silky.
But I think we're the kind of team
Those guys are staring too.
What do you say? Why don't you just try it out for a little while?
Okay.
Really? Thank you. I'll come get you right after school.
But yeah, she very clearly has an attraction to women. This part's gonna be really short because like, yeah, Yachi likes women. She is seen staring at Seiko's boobs in season 2, episode 17. She is very clearly attracted to Kyoko and constantly gay panics around her. Yeah. Lastly, save the best for last, we're gonna be talking about Oikawa. Not so much Iwa Oi, because Iwa doesn't have nearly as much screen time and development as Oikawa. We're mostly going to be talking about Oikawa Toru. Oikawa is a character that is arguably the most talked about character in the Haikyuu fandom, at least from what I've seen. I used to rag on him a lot, until one day I realized I kenned him. So that was awkward. That was a realization. Oikawa is a character that he's treated very weirdly in the fandom. People either baby him or people make him out to be like he's a monster. But objectively, Oikawa Toru is just like every other character in Haikyuu. He's a dorky teenage boy who plays volleyball. Emphasis on teenage boy. He's a teenage boy. He's not a bad person. And one of the most infamous scenes that Oikawa has with Kageyama is a flashback scene. It's not very long, where Kageyama is asking Oikawa to teach him how to serve, and Oikawa almost slaps Kageyama in the face before he is stopped by Wise Me. This scene is very infamous in the Haikyuu fandom because people either use it as an excuse to hate on Oikawa, or they used it as an excuse to say that Kageyama deserved to be hurt by Oikawa, which both of those statements are very wrong. Yeah, Oikawa deserves to be held accountable for that because it wasn't a very good thing to do, but it doesn't make him a horrible person. He was what, like 14 when that happened? 13, 14? Like, he was a child. He was younger than me when that happened. I'm 17. I'm Oikawa's, like, age when he's playing against Karasuno. Like, teenagers suck. Spoiler alert, teenagers are the worst. But Oikawa is, again, arguably one of the most gay-coded characters in the show. Just the way he acts, just his mannerisms are very, like, they can be picked up on as gay. And most LGBT people, and just people in the Haikyuu fandom, even straight people, are like, yeah, this guy is gay, or at least bisexual. I've always saw him as bisexual with a preference for men, because I feel like Oikawa is the type of person that could like a girl. Like, I don't think that he's like completely gay. I do think that the twink jokes are funny. Most of Oikawa jokes are pretty tired. That one is becoming tired. I think the best era of Haikyuu jokes was the plaid shorts era, specifically on Tik Tok. That was probably the best. But Oikawa is a character that is very interesting because he parades himself as being very narcissistic and self-centered and kind of full of himself. He thinks he's so cool, but underneath it all, he's very insecure, and he feels less than Kageyama because Kageyama has all this natural talent, and he is jealous, he's envious of Kageyama because he's had to put in a lot of hard work. And Iwa, well, Iwa doesn't get nearly as much screen time or as much development as Oikawa. Iwa is kind of his foundation. He's like the person that is able to ground Oikawa, keep him from going a little too far. Like I mentioned earlier, Iwa is the one who stops Oikawa from hitting Kageyama, and then Iwa punches him in the face. Roll the clip.
俺はもっと俺がってうるせえてめえ一人で戦ってるつもりか冗談じゃねえぞボケ
And Iwa is, I love Iwa a lot. I think that he is genuinely just a nice person. Also, he's really hot. Iwaizumi, 27, athletic trainer. Call me. Actually don't, I'm 17, that would be illegal. No, but Iwa is a character that while he doesn't get a whole lot of screen time, he is kind of the foundation. If Oikawa was a big flashy billboard on the street, Iwa would be the big old pole that supports him. What a great metaphor, Ruby. If I'm being completely honest, I don't really have much of an attachment to Iwa Oi. If you've been on TikTok for a second, you would know that I am a Oisuga supremacist. That's quite literally my username. I think that their dynamic could 100% be read as queer-coded. However, I think it's more Oikawa that is gay-coded, and Iwa and Oikawa are just always together, so they get shipped a lot. I personally think Iwa is probably more attracted to girls, and his relationship with Oikawa is very important to him, and I think that he very much loves and appreciates Oikawa, but I think that their relationship is not meant to be read as romantic. However, I totally understand why people see it that way. Now let's get back to the main topic, queer coding in Haikyuu. What did all this rambling about relationships even mean? What's the point of it all? Well, queer coding has a lot of debate. Should there be less queer coding and more just straight upfront representation? Is it important for there to be LGBT characters in shows that don't revolve around romance? My opinion on this is yes. I love shows that are able to have gay representation. Shows like Given, Yuri on Ice, She-Ra, The Owl House, Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beast, which is amazing and so underrated. Please watch Kipo, it's so fucking good. I think it's very important that a lot of children's media nowadays has not shied away from showing the gay. The one thing that I have noticed about a lot of these gay shows like She-Ra, Steven Universe, The Owl House, is they tend to really only have WOW rep, which like is important, but like there's a weird lack of MLM representation, and there's also a weird lack of people not using the right words. Like no one ever says lesbian, gay, bi. Like, I think it's important to start using those words, because the more that we have that kind of LGBT representation of kids media, the more it's going to normalize the LGBT community and the less homophobic people we'll have in our world, because media, while might not seem as important as other big issues in the world, media is extremely important, especially nowadays where almost everyone has a cell phone and has access to a supercomputer in their pocket, and they can look up whatever they want. It gives people a lot more knowledge. It gives people the chance to educate so there is less bigotry and hatred in the world, and I think shows like Haikyuu, which are so popular right now, having queer representation is extremely important. Personally, I'm fine with Haikyuu not having a lot of explicit romance because that's not really what the story is about. It's about forming bonds and it's about friendship. However, some of the relationships in the show could easily be read as queer, and I think it is a little disappointing that stuff like Sukiyama and Boku Waka isn't canon. Does this take away from the show? I don't think it does. But is it important to acknowledge that queer coding exists and it can be good and it can also be a problem? I think so. This was mostly just an excuse for me to ramble about Haikyuu and how much I love it. But leave me any thoughts that you have about queer coding in Haikyuu and other anime and media just in general, and hopefully I'll post something else soon because I definitely need to post on here more. Follow me on Instagram. I have a personal and a cosplay account. Follow me on TikTok. I have my fan account and my cosplay account, and you can also follow me on Twitter if you want. I don't really do anything on Twitter, but if you want, go ahead. Like, subscribe. Don't turn notifications on. I mean, you can, but I don't post often, so I don't know why you would. Thanks. I'll see you guys later.